Hello everyone, I'm Claire, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be taking you through the process of altering and mending some thrifted clothes. It's been like 5 months since I did a thrifting video, and I know most people watch me for nail polish content, but I mentioned making this video in my last thrift haul from like October, so I wanted to finally do it. And I enjoy making this type of content even if it doesn't get as many views. A couple of disclaimers before I get into it. First is that I don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to mending or altering clothes. I know just the very basics of hand sewing, where I can attach things together, but it does not look pretty. So this is in no way a tutorial or a guide, but I do want to show that it doesn't really take a lot of skill to be able to fix things well enough. And I think that being able and willing to repair your clothes when they get holes or alter things that don't work for you is an important part of sustainable fashion. Of course, being mindful of where you get your clothes is important, but it also matters how you treat items once they're in your closet. So if you can patch something or adjust the fit or anything else to make it last as long as possible without needing to be replaced, it doesn't matter if you do it perfectly, it's still worth the effort. The other disclaimer is that I didn't really know how to film the process. It was tricky getting the camera angle right while also being in a comfortable position, and also filming the whole process for certain things would have taken up way too much storage on my phone. So I just have a few short clips actually showing what I did, but hopefully the before and afters plus my explanation will give you a good enough idea of how I did things even without the visuals. So let's get into it. I'm gonna start with 3 pairs of pants that were too long. I'm starting to realize that I might have proportionally short legs for my height, because I'm average height, but a lot of pants I try lately are too long for me. And I think I just didn't used to have this problem as much like in high school and college because I wore skinny jeans and those don't drag on the ground. Even if they're too long, they just bunch up at the ankle. So starting with the most straightforward repair, I've got these blue sweatpants. And they were the easiest because they're made of the most substantial fabric, so I didn't have to do a seam all the way around. I could just fold them under and sew in a couple places, and that would be enough for them to stay in place at the right length. And conveniently, they have these extra seams down the front and back, which means I was able to camouflage my stitches by doing them along the seams. So I marked the length with some pins, folded them under, and then sewed a few stitches through both layers on each of those front and back seams and along the side seams. So a total of 4 places on each pant leg. And that was that. They're a good length now. I haven't worn these pants a ton because they feel too nice to wear at home, where my cat will probably snag them by making biscuits on my lap, but I also don't go out in sweatpants that often. But I am still glad that I made them more wearable. The next pants are these black cargo pants, and they are a tall size, so I'm not surprised that these ones are too long, and this process was a bit more complicated. At first, I tried to do a similar thing as I did with the last pair, just folding them under and sewing them in a few spots, but that didn't work out for a couple reasons. One is that I accidentally made the length a bit uneven, but the main one is that this is a very thin, lightweight fabric, and so it didn't stay in place when it was held up by just a few stitches, it flopped back down. So I took out those stitches, repinned it, and then sewed almost all the way across in the front and back. And this is a great example of how alterations don't have to be perfect to be functional and good enough, because even though I got the length pretty even, there were some creases in the fabric that meant the way I folded it wasn't the same on each side, and my line of stitches is not at the same height on both pant legs. But because it's dark thread on dark fabric, and because I know people aren't going to be scrutinizing the hem of my pants, it's totally okay. So I'm happy with how these turned out, and I have gotten some wear out of them. And then the last pair of pants is this flowy Houndstooth pair. I love how wide the legs are, but again, they were a bit long. And after doing the other 2 pairs, I could tell that this fabric would probably need more than a few stitches to stay in place, since it's not very substantial, so I decided to fold them under and sew all the way around. And this took forever, like multiple hours, because I am not very fast at hand sewing and these pants are very wide at the bottom, so there's a lot of hem. But I did get them done eventually. though unfortunately I somehow made one leg a little shorter than the other. It's not that big a difference, and I'm telling myself it's not really noticeable since I don't want to redo them. Like if I'm wearing shoes or moving around and you're not really looking for it, you can't really tell, right? But I haven't actually worn them yet since there hasn't been a lot of pants weather since I finished them. So once we get to fall, I'll see if I wear them or if the length is still bothering me. Next, I'll talk about a couple skirts where I had to take in the waist. First is this rainbow tie-dye skirt. It has an elastic waist, and it was the size where, unstretched, it was pretty similar to my waist measurement, but it was a little loose, and there wasn't enough tension to keep it from falling down. So I figured the easiest thing to do would be to fold the waistband in a couple places and just sew through it, so those folds of extra fabric would be on the inside. This skirt has a lot of vertical seams a few inches apart going all the way around, so I basically took 2 of those seams and brought them together, and that's where I sewed. And I did that in a couple different places, kind of on the sides but towards the back, and it's definitely visible. It creates almost a pleat effect that you can tell the rest of the skirt doesn't have, but I don't really mind. It adds a little volume in those areas, makes the silhouette a little fuller, so I think this was pretty successful. I have dealt with some other skirts more recently that were easier to alter because the waist was just an elastic band in a channel, so I was able to make a small hole in the waistband to access the elastic and either shorten or lengthen it, and then sew the hole closed. But with this one, there's more stitching holding the elastic in place, so that wouldn't really have worked, and I just had to deal with sewing through a bunch of layers of fabric and elastic, which wasn't the easiest, but it worked. Then the other skirt was a bit more challenging. It's this dark, not quite paisley printed one that's part of a matching set. The waistband was also a little big for my waist, but it's not stretchy even though part of it looks like it would be. Maybe it used to be stretchy, but the elastic wore out. And there's also no zipper or other closure, so if I just made the waistband smaller by folding it and sewing it in place like I did with the last skirt, I actually wouldn't be able to put the skirt on. I need the full circumference to be able to get it over my hips. So I had to figure out a way to make it adjustable, where it can be at its original size while I'm putting it on, be made temporarily smaller so it stays on, and then go back to full size when I take it off. And I remembered that I've seen jeans that are made adjustable by having buttons on the waistband and a denim tab with a buttonhole so you can cinch them to a smaller size. So I decided to do something like that. There were 2 extra buttons that came with the matching shirt, so I stole those and put them on the waistband. And then I didn't really know how to sew a fabric tab with a buttonhole, or even what fabric I would use, so I turned to something I do know how to do, knitting. I combined a couple of dark blue yarns and just kind of improvised these sort of little rectangles that taper on one side and have a buttonhole. And then I sewed them in place on the waistband, far enough away from the button that the waistband has to fold over a bit for them to join. So I can leave them unbuttoned when I'm taking the skirt on and off, and button them when I need it to stay on. This is probably the alteration that I'm most proud of because it's functional and I really like how it looks. It adds a fun little detail to the skirt, like something you would see in fantasy-inspired clothing. Plus, I really like the gold buttons, so it's nice that they're not just on the shirt now. If I were to do it again, I would probably knit on smaller needles and do a tighter stitch so the tabs are less stretchy, but I'm still really happy with how it turned out, and I think this could be a method I use again in the future. Now I might as well show you what I did with the shirt from this matching set. It had a hole in the sleeve. I don't think it was there when I bought it, though it is possible, but it's more likely that it got it when I went against the instructions on the tag and put it in the washing machine. Gotta love rayon, it falls apart if you look at it wrong. And this was another item where the first thing I tried didn't really work. My first thought was to make a fold in the sleeve so the frayed part would be on the inside and just sew along that line. And I'm not sure if I missed part of the frayed section or if the fabric there just didn't have enough structural integrity to hold up to my stitches, but I ended up with more frayed fabric on the outside of my seam. So I pivoted, I bought some iron-on patches, cut one down to the right size, put it on the inside of the sleeve, and ironed it in place. And this worked pretty well. It's not super noticeable because the patch is a dark color like the shirt, you can just kind of see the outline of the patch. And I'm glad I have these patches now. I was able to use them on another item that I'm not showing in this video. Just a very easy way to fix a hole if you don't know other methods. Now for another sleeve repair. This next item is the only one in this video that isn't thrifted. It's a cardigan I got as a Christmas present, and it was bought new. Everything was fine the first couple times I wore it, but then I made the mistake of pushing the sleeves up, and the seams started coming apart at the wrist. Luckily, this was probably the repair I felt most confident about doing because I was able to use a knitting skill. I guess technically it's crochet, but it's something I've used in conjunction with knitting. Basically, when you want to join together knit fabric, instead of sewing with thread, you can use yarn and a crochet hook. You make a slip knot in your yarn, put it on a crochet hook, stick the hook under a stitch on the edge of each knit piece, and then use the hook to pull the yarn through both stitches and the slip knot, so you're left with one stitch on the hook. And then you just repeat that as far as you need to go. I don't know if I explained that very well, but you can probably find a tutorial somewhere. So that was pretty easy to do. Actually, the trickiest part of this repair was getting the loose yarn to stop unraveling, because if I kept pulling on it, I could have undone the whole seam. And I thought that if I just started my seam on the part that hadn't come apart yet, that would be enough to keep it from unraveling more, but it wasn't. So I had to find the right way to thread the original yarn through itself so it would stay put even if it got pulled on. And in the process of doing that, I ended up with more seam to have to join back together, but once I got it figured out, it was easy enough to redo the seam. And the yarn I had was a really good match, so I don't think you can even really tell that it's been repaired. Next up, we have this iris t-shirt, and I would say this was one of the easiest alterations to do. No sewing at all, just scissors. I wanted to crop this shirt because I don't like the fit of basic unisex t-shirts when they're full length, and obviously you could sew a new seam if you really wanted, but with this type of fabric, it's not really necessary. You can just cut part of it off, and it's not gonna unravel, it'll just kind of roll up on itself. So I put it on and marked where I wanted to cut. It's good to start a little longer than you think because you can always cut more, but you can't uncut. And then I wanted to give myself a line to follow, which you can do with any type of straight edge and a pen or marker. I used the edge of my table, so I just drew my line and then cut, and it ended up a bit longer than what I wanted, and I think my line was slightly slanted, so I cut a bit more, and now it's a good length. I've done this with other t-shirts and sweatshirts in the past. It's one of the easiest ways to customize your clothes. And then with this shirt, there was one other thing I wanted to do, and that was trim off some of the backing from the embroidery. It was making it so the shirt was kind of stiffer in that area and laid awkwardly on my chest, so I just wanted to get rid of some of that excess. And it was easy enough to do. I just used my scissors and trimmed around the flowers and the letters, and it's a lot more comfortable to wear now. I have gotten a good amount of wear out of this shirt. It's a nice pop of color, which is something I don't have a lot of in my closet. And then last will be some dresses. Two that were a little less successful, and one that turned out pretty well. So first is this white dress with a brown print. I don't think I have any footage of the mending process, but one thing I had to address was a little hole it got at the shoulder when I washed it, because again, rayon has the structural integrity of a wet noodle. So that was easy enough to sew up, but the main thing is that it has a wrap style top with one little snap to hold it together. One side of the snap actually came unattached from the dress when I washed it, though luckily it was still attached to the other side of the snap, so I was able to sew it back on. But that's why the top of the dress looks how it does in the before clips. It doesn't even have the snap holding it closed. But that's not even the issue. The issue is that on me, the snap isn't enough to keep it from gapping open anyway. So I wanted to stitch it together in a couple more places to stop it from gapping. And I don't know, it is better now that I did that, but it does still gap enough that I feel better wearing a tank top under it. So part of me thinks I should have left it totally open so it looks more intentional, like I could just always wear a tank top under it and plan to have it showing instead of looking like I'm trying unsuccessfully to be covered. So let me know what you think I should do. Is it better sewed together or left totally open? I'm also just not sure how I feel about this dress generally. I thrifted it, but I realized later that it's not great quality. It's from a fast fashion brand, but I might as well try to get some use out of it. Then we've got this green floral dress, which was just an interesting journey. When I was trying it on at the thrift store, I noticed that it had some stains and also some holes in the waist seam. So I was like, well, I don't know if I can get rid of these stains, but it's cute and comfortable, so I could just get it to wear at home. But I don't want to pay full price, so maybe I'll see if they'll give me a discount because of the flaws. And I actually got it for free because that was the policy at that thrift store for items with holes or stains, so that was nice. But then I brought it home and was taking a closer look at the seam with the holes, and I realized that the reason it's coming apart is that someone detached and reattached the skirt at some point, and they did it imperfectly. At least I'm pretty sure that's what happened, because the stitches there don't look the same as the ones on the other seams. The other seams are serged. And it would also explain why it doesn't have the same number of pleats on each side. I'm guessing that at some point someone wanted to make the skirt shorter, but they didn't want to take length off the bottom because the print is different there, so they removed the skirt, took some length off the top part, and reattached it imperfectly. I'm not even the first person who has tried to sew up some holes. There's a couple different threads going on. So my mending isn't really the interesting part here. I just added my own messy stitches. They're the ones in the lighter colored thread. But I thought it was really fun to see something that had already been altered and try to piece together the history of this dress. It was like the more low-key version of when Abby Cox looks at antique dresses to learn about how they were constructed and reconstructed over time. So yeah, this dress is still not in great condition. I think I would have to fully detach and reattach the skirt again to get it to look right. And I haven't worn it a ton, but I did enjoy figuring out what it's been through. And last, we have this long floral dress that you might recognize if you were watching my channel around Halloween last year. I got it for my Florence and the Machine costume, and it fit fairly well, but it was a little bit roomy, so I wanted to make it a little tighter in the waist area because that was the only part that was giving it any shape. This dress is made of 2 layers. There's the outer floral layer and then a white lining, and in the center back there was an area where the floral fabric ended and you just see the white. So my idea was to join the edges of the floral fabric and sew the waistband underneath where they come together. And because there were so many layers of fabric in that area, I didn't want to have to sew through them all by sewing on the inside of the dress. So instead, I did start the needle on the inside, but then I pulled it through to the outside of the dress and just kind of went back and forth, passing the needle through a tiny bit of fabric on one side and then the other, and pulling the thread through. And I'm happy with how this turned out. I think it looks really natural for the floral fabric to meet in the middle, and it also helped it not drag on the ground as much. Still not a dress that I'm going to be wearing all the time. A floor-length dress is a bit much most days, but it's ready to wear anytime I need to be dramatic and whimsical. So yeah, those are all the items I wanted to show you today. There have been other things I've needed to repair or adjust, but at a certain point it just gets redundant because it's the same kinds of fixes, and also feeling like I needed to film the process was getting in the way of actually getting things done. And like I said, my main goal with this video was not necessarily to show you how to do certain repairs or alterations. I just wanted to show that whatever level of skill you have, you can at least do something to make your clothes work better for you. Maybe you don't know how to sew at all, maybe you kind of know how to use a sewing machine, maybe you're like me and can just do a little hand sewing. Whatever the case may be, I think it's worth making an effort to repair instead of replace. But yeah, I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you to everyone who's watching till the end. Let me know in the comments if you have a favorite from the alterations I showed today, or if you've done any mending or other crafting lately that you want to tell me about. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would leave me a like or maybe even subscribe. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!